the possibility that maybe you're not seeing reality in the way that it actually is. Maybe you're just picking out certain things because you have this veil, you have this dirt on your perceptual filter that won't let you see the positive stuff, and maybe you could find a way to see it. Maybe that would be helpful. One of the things that I did recently was, because I was so stuck on this people are selfish pricks ride, I actually sat down. I didn't write it down, but I on my fingers I was counting with gritted teeth the situations where recently I had seen people not act selfishly, where I'd seen people act with kindness, where I'd seen people act in a way that was selfless, and that included things that occurred within me. And I'm digressing here, but this is actually quite good. Not that the rest of it isn't good. This is I'm saying that this is a good point that's worth digressing. Is where you see the desire to be kind and selfless within yourself. What that proves, it's still use that as an example, because what that proves is that being selfless and having the desire to help other people is completely natural. I think a lot of depression can occur when we feel like the world's a bad place and people don't care. Well, actually, culture might have brought them to the place to a place where they seem not to care, or they might have been trained into engaging in non-compassionate behaviors, but these things are not natural. Let's not digress on that point. Let's cover that another time. So number 5 is dealing with shame. Somebody like myself who's come from I wouldn't say a Catholic background, but my parents and the area that I'm from is a very, very Catholic area, and that whole Irish Catholic shame is around. And I don't think it's exclusive to Catholics. I think all of us can get into this state of guilt about the fact that we feel depressed. You know, what have I got to be depressed about? There are people in Africa who are watching their kids die of curable diseases because, you know, I don't know, a warlord has come and stolen all the medication and exchanged it for AK-47s. Wow, that was a really long-winded story. There are people out there who are struggling more than we are. We're so rich, we're so wealthy, and yet I feel like shit and I'm so fucking depressed. Maybe it's because we're in a rich, wealthy culture that we feel so depressed. Maybe it's because we know there are people in Africa, there are people all over the world right now suffering incredible injustice. And maybe that's not something to be ashamed of. Maybe that's a reason why we're depressed. And maybe if we are all one consciousness and we are as you know, part of a human collective globally, and we're not a series of disparate tribes, then maybe that's why we're depressed. Because ultimately, if you're a member of my family and you're suffering over there, then I'm going to suffer here. No matter how fantastic and luxurious my lifestyle is, I'm still going to suffer emotionally, am I not? In fact, is it not the case that if my lifestyle is luxurious and wealthy and all the rest of it, but I know that you're dying of just starvation, you simply don't have enough calories to put in your mouth to stay alive, then yeah, that's going to be depressing. So, without wanting to digress too much, there is a lot of shame around depression, and there's a couple of things to remember. Depression is completely normal. Don't believe in the discourse that some people spout that it's a modern phenomena. Don't believe in the discourse that it is the mental illness of the self-indulgent. Don't believe in the discourse that it only occurs to weak people, because that is nonsense. Some of the quote-unquote strongest people in our history suffered from depression. One of my personal heroes, Winston Churchill, he suffered from terrible bouts of depression. It doesn't equate to self-indulgence. It doesn't equate to weakness. And feeling shame and guilt is only going to lock the depression in place. So you've got to lighten up on the beating the crap out of yourself routine and just forgive yourself for being human. I'm sorry I'm human. I'm sorry I'm weak. I don't really know why I feel like this. Obviously I don't want to feel like this. Who the fuck would want to feel like this every day? But I do, and I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to find a solution. Where you may feel shame and guilt is when you give up. When you start to give up, you know, that's when you might want to give yourself a little spare up the arse, because you really can't fail. I know it sounds trite, I know it sounds cheesy, but if you think about it logically, it's rational sense. You can't fail until you give up. If you refuse to give up, you're always on a path of success. It might just be taking 70 years, but you know, you can't fail if you don't give up. So forgive yourself for being human. Do away with the shame and the guilt. It's not going to help. In fact, it's going to make things worse. And allow for the fact that many people have felt this. Many people will feel it. You're not on your own, and there are solutions, but it might take a bit of retraining that we never get. That isn't part of normal modern Western culture to give people, because they don't want us to have the ability to manage our own emotions. What they want is for us to go, my emotions are out of control, I'm weak, give me drugs, daddy, give me drugs. And then you go to a paternal daddy authority figure, and the doctor, you know, with the uniform goes, oh, you have depression, and here are some pills, now go away and feel better. That's what they want. It's not necessary. We don't need it. We are perfectly capable of healing ourselves. We're incredibly tough, incredibly adaptable creatures. Number 6 that I wrote down in my scrawly handwriting is actually challenging the negative beliefs. I mentioned before challenging the thoughts as they come in. Try and identify the negative beliefs. So if you think about it visually, which I have to because otherwise it doesn't work, there is these negative depressive thoughts. Little spirals that come into your brain, and they say, hey, the world is shit, it's awful, there's no point. But they've come from a source, and the source is the belief. The source that's saying, so the depressive thought is, people are mean, people are selfish, people are horrible at root. There's a belief there. So go and identify the belief and find that neurological cluster which represents the belief, which in that case would be, people at root are evil, or people at root are just selfish, domesticated primates. They're just mammals who want to eat as much as they can, acquire as many resources as they can, and fuck as much as they can, and they're motivated by fear and blah 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 blah. That is a standard kind of depressive thought. There are lots of depressive thoughts. That's a fairly standard one, but that's a belief. So actually then you have a belief, and once you've identified the belief, you can actually take control of it. You've just, you know, empowered yourself hugely to take control of dealing with that belief. Challenge it. You know, as I mentioned before, if your belief is people suck, then start coming up with examples where people don't suck, where actually it's natural, you know, to be caring, it's natural to be loving, it's natural to, you know, or nothing ever works out is another very, very common depressive line of thought. Well, actually, things work out all the time. And actually, you know, nothing ever works out for me. Things only work out for other people. So you can't think of anything in your life that ever worked out for you? No, not anything, nothing. Well, you're here now. You're not dead. So something's working. You're still breathing. I think it's Anthony Robbins that said people who have quite robust belief systems believe things like they don't believe, because I'm not a millionaire, I'm a failure. They believe things like, every day above ground is a good day. You know, I'm not dead yet. Actually, if you think about it, that is a much healthier, much more robust belief. Number 7 is to find the humor. Now, this is not going to work when you're really in the bleak place. When you're in the dark place, this is not going to work. The only thing that could possibly work in the dark place is the first thing I mentioned. When you're really depressed, is to allow it. Is to say, okay, and just accept the thoughts as being thoughts, and accept the feelings as being feelings, and saying, okay, I accept this. But the funny side of depression actually comes in when you spiral up a little bit, and you can actually challenge some of the beliefs and the thoughts. And there are some traits about depressive thoughts and about depressive states that are actually quite funny. That one thing I mentioned before, which is huge amounts of generalization. There's kind of a adolescent, if you notice your depressive thoughts and you notice your depressive states, see how I'm encouraging you to dissociate here? Subtle, isn't it? Subtle. Don't trust those NLP practitioners, they'll hypnotize you into feeling really good. I'm encouraging you to dissociate from the state. Yes, my language patterns are reflective of the fact that unconsciously I want you to dissociate, because another good psychological principle is people are not their behaviors. The fact that you get depressed doesn't mean you're a depressive. I hate that. I hate when psychiatrists will stick a label on you. You're a depressive. No, you're just in a depressed state. And there are strategies for getting into depressed states. There are certain ways of moving your body. There are certain things you can think that will cause you to feel a degree of depression. The funny side of it to me is this, you know, I'm not laughing at your depression, because I can't laugh at your depression. That's not appropriate. I couldn't do that, but nobody can fucking stop me from laughing at my depression, and my depression is ridiculous. There is this angry adolescent petulance to the depressive states that I get into, and the depressive states that I believe everybody gets into, and kind of a drama queenie-ness to it, if you know what I mean. A drama queenie-ness, there's a new adjective. This whole thing of everything is shit and nothing ever works for me. It's so ridiculous. It's not, you know, it's completely irrational, and and maybe this is why we feel like guilt and shame on the side, is because we know the shit doesn't even make sense. The things that we're thinking when we go into a depressed state are quite childish. They're quite immature. It's like, it looks and sounds, I always think of like a 14-year-old who's dyed his fingernails black and has his hair like over one eye, and everything is black, and he's covered in black, and he's got eyeliner on, and he's like, oh, everything is shit, and the world is just cruel and mean and horrible. And there are a couple of comedy sketches that I've picked that I try and think of when depressed. It's much easier to stop a depressive thought before it gets through the door. Once it's got through the door and it's in, then it can be quite difficult to pull yourself out. But if you can stop it as it's coming in, that's far more powerful. A couple of comedy sketches. One of them is from The Fast Show, which is Johnny Nice Painter, and the other one is from Henry Rollins, which is in the links bar below. If you get a chance, you know, it takes like 30 seconds to watch these clips, and they are both quite funny. And if you've suffered from depression in a serial fashion over several years, depression, you know, like I have, my depression comes out the blue and there is no rational cause for it, then I think that these clips will really resonate with you, and you'll find them quite funny. I'm nearly out of time. The last thing I want to talk about, which is such a huge topic, I'm only going to just briefly summarize it for you now, is the power of circumstances. We have the sort of subtitle, or the signature to the site is "The map is not the territory," which is a phrase used by or coined by Alfred Korzybski, just basically to remind us that our thoughts about reality are not reality. We have a map of mental illness that is directly drawn from our map of physical illness. It doesn't fucking work. You can't do it. Like, they've tried for years. I think it's time now for psychiatry to step down and say, look guys, we tried. We did everything we could. We gave you all the drugs we had and nothing worked. And just back the fuck off and say, look, we don't know. And just let themselves breathe and feel the power of forgiving themselves as they say, we don't fucking know, because they don't know. Sometimes psychiatry works, but that is because they shotgun blast the problem with a whole load of different ways of dealing with it, and a whole load of ways of different drugs until something sticks. Does that sound like science to you? That does not sound like science to me. That's not scientific. And one thing I will tell you is this: what they're missing is the power of your circumstances. Your, like any mental illness, not just depression, but any mental or emotional state that comes left field, that has no rational cause to it. You know, grief and sadness are not depression. Grief and sadness can lead to depression, but if you have something to grieve for, or you have a situation that you should be sad about, that is mental health. That's fine. That also is circumstantial. The loss of a loved one will lead to sadness and grief, and God, you should feel that. What are we if we don't feel that? Who wants to numb with drugs the feeling of grief and sadness having lost somebody they love? What are we becoming? No, that's natural, that's human. You feel your grief and your sadness. That's where you repress it, then it can lead on to depression and other neuroses. The power of circumstances is huge. You must accept that if you're regularly getting depressed, you're probably leading a lifestyle that leads to depression. You may even be doing certain things or engaging in a relationship that is causing you to feel depressed. Just because you won't let yourself see it because you've got a psychological blind spot doesn't mean it's not there. This is such a big subject that actually I think the next video I do is going to be all about mental health, the old map of mental health, and the power of circumstances in terms of understanding mental health issues. Okay guys, that's enough for today. Thank you very much for listening, and keep smiling.